Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor has met the Prime Minister at Chequers to discuss plans to fix the economy. Jeremy Hunt is overhauling his predecessor's mini-budget after saying it went too far, too fast. He warns the country faces a difficult period, with tax cuts not coming as quickly as people want, and spending could be squeezed to help balance the books. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds is calling for a general election.
It's not about a change of Chancellor. Look, they can't simply reverse what they've done through something as straightforward as that. They can't simply get round the fact that the Bank of England and the government have been in completely different places for the last month. They've got to recognise what they have done requires the chance for a real fresh start, and that will require a general election.
Just Stop Oil protesters have vandalised an Aston Martin showroom in central London. Demonstrators sat on Park Lane, some gluing themselves to the road, whilst another activist sprayed orange paint over the luxury car maker's building. The group is demanding the government halts all new oil and gas licences. Well, meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion is also staging a demonstration, marching in Parliament Square. It comes as the Home Secretary announces plans to crack down on protests that cause serious disruption and threaten public safety. Suella Braverman says police will be given new powers to take a more proactive approach, specifically targeting tactics used by some climate activists. The government is pushing ahead with a law to, quote, keep Britain moving during transport strikes. Legislation will be introduced to ensure minimum service levels are maintained during a walkout. Unions criticise the move, which they say will be unworkable. The measures are expected to come into force next year. Travel expert Simon Calder says there are practical problems that must be worked out.
If you say, right, we're going to run 40% of trains, who decides which ones those are, and who decides who's allowed to go on them, because they're all going to fill up. So there's lots of problems associated with it. And as you were saying, it's not going to come until next year anyway, if it gets through a very divided Parliament. And it will be interesting to see how it does work and whether you can actually do this.
Firefighters have been tackling a large blaze in Glasgow. Scottish Fire and Rescue was called to Kingston Street in the Tradeston area just before 10 o'clock this morning. People were being advised to close their windows and stay away from the site. There are no reports of any injuries. In international news, Iran says 4 inmates have been killed and 61 injured in a fire at Tehran's Evin prison. The jail is notorious for holding political prisoners. The blaze comes amid ongoing unrest following the death of Mahsa Amini. The 22-year-old died in custody after violating the country's strict dress code for women. Security officials say calm has now been restored at the facility. And back here, more than 1,000 Paddington bears, left as a tribute to the late Queen, have found a new home. An image of the Queen Consort has been released to mark their donation to the children's charity Barnardo's. The toys were left at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle by mourners in the days after Queen Elizabeth's death was announced. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. Welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. This is what I'm afraid of. Rather than focusing on what they will deliver us, the voting public, in the midst of this sort of governmental breakdown, the Labour Party, instead of offering a respectable sort of glimpse as to what their vision is, they're once again taking digs at the Conservative Party. That's, of course, to detract from the fact that their leader, Sir Keir Starmer, was unable to say what a woman is, was let off from Beergate, which, in my view, seems somewhat dubious, and their lack of any real coherent policies. Actually, no, I tell a lie. They have finally put forward a nonsensical decarbonisation energy policy by 2030, which is somewhat unclear and has so far been poo-pooed by every energy expert I've spoken to. So instead of showing us, the electorate, what a mature party they are and a government in waiting, they've launched a childish attack on the Conservative Party in 4 scathing print ads aiming to capitalise on the Tory mess. Now, one of the posters has the heads of both Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng superimposed over those of crash test dummies, saying, "These dummies have crashed the economy. Tory recklessness is ruining Britain's standing on the world stage. Only Labour has a plan to restore it. Another accuses the Conservatives of forcing thousands of hard-working families to pay an extra £500 a month for their mortgages. Well, let's not let facts get in the way. For starters, whilst mistakes were made, there is no way that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng can be blamed for all of that. What about COVID, the Russian invasion, which has had a serious impact on the price of energy, and, of course, the global rise in interest rates and inflation? There's one which features a shredded Union Jack with the slogan, Britain's reputation in tatters. And the fourth with Liz Truss and Jeremy Hunt dressed as clowns. Ha ha, ha ha. Very funny. The British public aren't laughing, though. We're crying. Perhaps you, the Labour Party, could explain how you can soothe our tears by offering us a credible alternative instead of sinking to a lower level. I almost preferred it when they actually said that when they had nothing to say, because if this is where they're coming from, we'll be out of the frying pan and into the fire if they're elected. It's like having a friend who waits for it all to go wrong and then offers no alternative and then goes, nah, 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 nah. Whose interest will a general election serve? And if the Labour Party do win one now, it won't be because they've done anything right. It'll be because they've done nothing at all. It's not a game. And neither is it a done deal. If you're serious about running this country, prove it. Show your hand and tell the British public clearly what you stand for. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? Serious questions are being raised about the democratic legitimacy of the government, with reports of Conservative MPs planning a coup to remove Liz Truss from the top job. And according to sources, letters of no confidence have been flying into the 1922 committee, with the Tories potentially moving from one leader to another, neither elected via general election. Is democracy being eroded? At 5:50, of course 4:50, sorry, it's Worldview. And according to reports, Iran is planning to send powerful missiles to the Russian army, further heightening tensions in the region. And as the war drags on, is Putin's cloak of invincibility starting to wear off? At 5 o'clock, it's Outside with former Mrs. Brown Boys star and actor Gary Hollywood. The show has won 5 BAFTAs and 5 national television awards. We'll talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside, who'll be joining me live in the studio. That's all on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Well, first of all, hello, Dawn.
Hi, good afternoon.
It's nice to see you. I've not worked with you sort of like this. You've sat here.
I know. I feel like we're really, really good friends without actually physically meeting.
I know.
It's weird, isn't it?
I've seen you on
social media does
I've seen you here, I've seen you there, and on Facebook. It's great. And hello, Andrew. Nice to see you again.
Hello, nice to see you again, Nana.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to start with you, Dawn, because, I mean, we're seeing the Labour Party now sort of showing us how they feel about this chaos. And to be honest, to be fair to them, it is sort of entertaining, but it's actually not funny. And I don't think I want to see them behaving in that way. But what's your view on it?
No, I kind of agree. You know what I want? I want support at the moment. I'm sure everybody watching wants support. I want strong and stable leadership. And I really hate to use that phrase, but that is what I want. I want somebody to give me that metaphorical hug and say, right, OK, we are going to do A, B and C. This is how we're going to make it work. So, you know, vote for us. And this isn't even a political point. Anyone can do this. But we're not getting that from anyone. So, you know, while I get why Labour have done this, and it is what political parties do, isn't it? We can all remember that sort of like Labour's not working poster from back in the day. But it's childish, Nana. It's like, it's not helping me as a voter or someone worrying about paying my energy bill or worrying about getting an NHS appointment or any of those things. Like, yeah, as you said, ha, very funny, but tell me what you're actually going to do instead. That's what I need right now.
It's just point scoring.
Yeah, I think Dawn makes a very good point. What are they going to do? And we don't know. And the only two aspects of the now discredited mini-budget that Labour rejected was the cut in the top rate of tax, it's gone, and also cancelling the rise in corporation tax from 19 to 25p next year, that's now gone too. So now they're on the same page as the Tories, and yet they're accusing them of crashing the economy, crashing interest rates, and yet they are now in exactly the same place as the Tories, and they do not have a single answer. I've seen successive opposition spokesmen on GBNews and elsewhere, and when they're pressed, what would you do? They just have a mantra. They attack the Tories.
Yes,
It's classic lazy opposition. It's the old maxim, oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. That's all they're doing. They're just waiting for the Tory government to screw up, and by my word, they're certainly doing that. But you would have thought Keir Starmer, he's been leader of the opposition now for 3 years. He might have a couple of ideas, apart from some boring green bank and some boring nationalised energy company that will cost an absolute fortune, and how that's going to get your and my gas bill down, I have no idea. But what about how they're going to get interest rates down? How are they going to get inflation down? Nothing to say.
Well, the bog standard answer as well. We're not in opposition. We're not actually in government yet, so we don't know the situation that we'll inherit. So, and I mean, that's just not good enough. There are lots of floating voters here who feel politically homeless, who want something to believe in. We are, the British public right now, are like sponges. We are ready to absorb something, and this is what they do. When you've got this wonderful, open, when you're teaching a child, they're very open to all suggestions and ideas. I feel like I'm like that right now. I'm thinking, if you've got any ideas, please let us know. I'm almost prepared to listen to you, but if this is the best you can come up with,
but I mean,
it's not good enough.
Labour are 33 points ahead at the moment in the polls. I mean, we all know what polls are. People always say what they think people want to hear. But they're 33. But that's not because of what they're putting forward. It's the fact that they're not the Tories. I mean, it's like, sort of like, we really are between a rock and a hard place. And heaven forbid there is a general election called within the next few weeks, because most of us now will be sitting there going, I have not got a clue who to vote for. I mean, I was doing a radio debate the other day, and the amount of Tory voters, dyed-in-the-wool blue Tory voters, phoning in and saying, I can't vote for this Conservative government, not as they are at the moment. It's worrying. And it's like, well, who are you going to vote for? Can you vote for Labour? Well, I can't really vote for them either. So, I mean, it would, if there was a general election, it would be fascinating to see the turnout.
Yeah, it would be low. But also, a general election is 6 weeks.
Yes.
Are we going to really have the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Foreign Secretary, all the people involved on the campaign trail up and down the country?
Not again.
We saw that with the ridiculous Tory leadership contest, which went on far too long. They could have done it in half the time. And we know why they dragged it out so long with all those hustings, because it made the Tory party some cash.
Is that why?
Yeah, they made money out of each hustings. Absolutely.
Wow.
I think £100,000 for each one. Were there 9 hustings? There you are, you've almost got $1 million.
Wow.
What are they spending it on, Andrew?
I don't know.
Spending it on a communications policy?
No, so because they could do with a communications policy, because they haven't got one. By the way, that press conference the other day with the Prime
my God,
Minister.
Nana, that was...
But the thing is, some of the questions, though, I mean, Peston's question, I mean, all the questions were just so...
But it was predictable.
This is not what we, ask some proper questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, can you ask some decent questions instead of, are you going to go, and when is it, is it good for you to stay, It was like, oh, no wonder she doesn't want to face this, if that is all they're going to ask. It's boring.
It was the only question. For all 4 questions asked the same thing. Why
Which they did, but I mean, it was just the way, when I keep going back to this strong and stable, and I'm sorry, I hate it as well, but it's like the way she looked around that room, literally like a rabbit caught in the headlights. And, that was no confidence, no decisiveness, no nothing. And I thought I wouldn't want her running a bath for me at the moment. She's got no confidence. She was absolutely clueless.
But they're horrible. I mean, like, the way the established media have behaved. I mean, you saw how they hounded Boris. They hounded her and Kwasi. They literally... despite the fact that it's actually their own party as well, despite the fact that what they were doing was almost a kamikaze thing, because her party internally combusting in front of her, and they weren't prepared to support her. And in the end, I almost wonder how Boris managed to put up with all of that for such a long period of time. It's no good for anyone's mental health. And I just think the whole behaviour, just so they get what they want, and in the end, that'll be nothing.
Who'd want the job now? I mean,
go for it, Andrew.
Are they really going to topple another Prime Minister? So that would be 3... Hang on. Boris won in 2019. Boris, Truss, another. 3. 3 Prime Ministers
Has that
in the
ever
first
happened?
Parliament. I shouldn't think that's
I don't think that's ever happened in modern
Can't imagine
history.
it's happened.
And the rest of the world are looking on at this. And first of all, when they got rid of Boris over cake, I mean, I'm sorry, but that was the biggest mistake.
It makes you almost nostalgic, doesn't it?
Well, it's hilarious, because the rest of the world are going, what, are you really seriously going to do that? Because they didn't get what they wanted. This is the internal layer of the party. Didn't get what they wanted, so they made sure they did. Right, then they weren't happy because Liz Truss was there, and that wasn't the candidate they wanted. They wanted Rishi. but they didn't get that. So now I just think...
And now we've got Jeremy Hunt. Yay. Be
Who's
careful
now
what
the
you
Prime
wish
Minister?
for.
He's the Prime Minister because we read in the Sunday papers today the next thing that's going to be junked is the 1p in the pound income tax cut next April, which would have benefited everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody would have benefited from that. That would have put billions of pounds of spending power back into the economy. He's junking it because he can. He's the most powerful Chancellor of the Exchequer in modern history because she cannot afford to lose the Chancellor.
He's running the whole show.
A man who lost 2 leadership elections. A man who will be criticised very heavily when the public inquiry into COVID starts, because he was the Secretary of State for Health who did not prepare.
Did not prepare, and he only got 16 votes, was it?
18.
18.
Out of a potential, and well, there we are. She wanted to get someone from the other side of the party. She's gone to the extreme left of the party, the dripping wet side of the party.
That could have been the only one that would do the job, though. Because the others would have said, no, why should we help you? I don't know why she should never have got rid of Kwasi Kwarteng. And I'm hearing now a lot of reports saying, well, actually, it might have actually worked. And, it was a different direction which we needed to go. We can't carry on in the way we are. And his supply-side ideas were good. And it's like... Oh.
But Nana, how she did that, right? He was sacked for literally putting her policies into place. They were her ideas. They campaigned on this ticket together from day one. So the disloyalty involved in her doing that, I couldn't ever trust someone who did that to run the country.
All about Rishi, then. He's not trustworthy.
No.
But my own paper, the Mail, reported yesterday that she was the one who overruled Rishi about cutting the top rate of tax. Now, that's the thing that really alienated most voters. Yes. They thought, why are you cutting the top rate?
And sent the markets into a spiral.
And it was her wish. He advised against it. She insisted. And apparently when one of her advisors said, Prime Minister, that will look like this budget's all about helping the rich, she turned on him. So she was tin-eared about all of this, and yet Rishi's got... she sacked the Chancellor.
How patient must he be not to actually give in to... I mean, I'd have been straight on the phone, like, hold on a minute, and using all the bad words under the sun to put my point across, because he's been stitched up left, right and centre.
Well, you know what, though? He's probably thinking, unlike most of them, for the greater good.
Yeah.
Which, if only they would...
Which that's right.
If they'd done that at the beginning, they're not thinking about us, the electorate.
No.
And none of them are. The Labour Party aren't thinking about us. They're not going to tell us what they're going to do. The Conservative Party aren't thinking about us. I mean, there literally is no one who is thinking about us. We are the voting public.
No. You mentioned children earlier on, Nana, and they are fighting like kids in a playground.
Embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Well, if you just joined us, welcome on board on this cheery note. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, still to come, the Great British Debate. And this hour, I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? Amid the political turmoil, questions are being raised about the democratic legitimacy of the government, with reports of Conservative MPs planning a coup to remove Liz Truss from Downing Street. What do you think? Is this all democratic or undemocratic? Send me your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet me at GBNews. I've got a poll up right now asking that question. Is democracy dead in the UK? Cast your vote now, but first, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather wet across the south and west, but drier in the north. Let's take a look at the details. After a dry afternoon, it'll be a wet end to the day as heavy rain moves in from the south with brisk winds. Coastal areas could see gusts of up to 30 miles per hour at times. Skies will cloud over in the south to end the afternoon, followed by some heavy rain this evening. It'll be breezy as the rain arrives, particularly around the coast. It'll also turn wet and windy across Wales this evening as a band of heavy rain moves in from the south. Rain will be fairly light and patchy across the Midlands, although there could be the odd heavier burst at times. Most areas will turn cloudy here with some outbreaks of drizzle. Holding on to some drier weather in northern England this evening, but turning increasingly cloudy. It'll turn chilly across Northumberland before the cloud arrives, with temperatures falling to 4 Celsius. Also staying dry at first across the Scottish borders with clear skies. Heavy rain and stronger winds will arrive later on in the night. A band of heavy rain and brisk winds will sweep across Northern Ireland this evening. Rain will be heavy and persistent for a few hours with a lot of spray on the roads. Bands of rain will continue to move north tonight, bringing strong winds for some. It'll turn drier in the south. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. Now, in this hour, the Great British Debate, I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? Now, after the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, sacked Kwasi Kwarteng and replaced him with the former Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, it seems to have created an impression to some that Hunt is now running the show. Now, he was asked actually earlier on TV whether he was actually running the country, and he said he wasn't. But what do you think? Is Liz Truss Prime Minister in name only? Questions are also being raised as to whether it was democratic and whether the government is even legitimate the way things are going, as well as reports of Conservative MPs planning to oust Truss in order to replace her with the likes of the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace or former Chancellor Rishi Sunak. Apparently letters are already going in. However, Andrew Mitchell MP believes that the party are just showing how historically ruthless it can be when getting rid of a leader who proves they are no longer capable to govern. Well, how long do they get? I mean, how many weeks has she been in? So, in my Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? Well, I'm joined now by former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben, thank you and welcome. In your view, the new Chancellor already moved away from the original promises on defence spending and reversing promised tax cuts from the leadership mates. How can this be legitimate and democratic? What do you think? What's your view?
Well, I think we've got a Conservative parliamentary party that has actually been, to some extent or another, in contempt of the people for many years. I mean, we'll recall going back to the Brexit vote that the parliamentary party didn't want to deliver Brexit. Then Boris Johnson came up with his withdrawal agreement, promised to get it done. And actually, for those of us who've actually scrutinised his agreement, know that we haven't got Brexit. Northern Ireland's been left behind in the European Union. And then we had Boris Johnson perhaps doing some of the most anti-libertarian policies ever in...
Oh, we've lost you. You've gone. Your signal was fading anyway, but it wasn't sounding great, Ben. Wonderful. Oh, it looks like he's moved. I think Ben's back. Let's go back to Ben. Yeah, Ben, you need to sort out your Wi-Fi. Okay, so carry on. So you were saying libertarian and all that. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know we've got a parliamentary party in the Conservatives that have been in contempt of the people for many years, and you know Boris Johnson we thought was the great liberator. He was the one who was going to deliver Brexit, but he sold his general election promise, which was false. He didn't deliver Brexit. Northern Ireland's been left behind. Then he delivered one of the most anti-libertarian policies ever, which was lockdown, aided and abetted by the printing of money by the Bank of England. And now we had, for the first time, we had a prime minister that was beginning to put control back in people's pockets. Deregulating was her promise, putting control back in businesses' hands. And what do we have? We have a rogue parliamentary party that has brought her down. She's been defenestrated by a whole lot of parliamentarians who simply didn't like what she was up to. The Conservative Parliamentary Party is behaving a bit like a bunch of out-of-control Roman consuls. And I think, sadly, we now need an election. I think they need to be held to account as a parliamentary party.
But it's interesting that you sort of point out that Boris Johnson didn't do what he's meant to be doing, but he was actually democratically elected. I mean, those by the people, those who you've pointed out, weren't actually democratically elected by the people, but those, for example, I mean, Liz Truss was elected by the MPs or the members of the party, but they were selected by the MPs. So, I just thought
the parallel. I don't think democracy is dead, but I think we've got a parliamentary party which is in contempt of the people. And the reason I cite Boris Johnson is because he got elected on a false promise, which he had no intention of delivering. And even now, you will hear every Conservative minister say, we got Brexit done, when they haven't got it done. They just haven't. You cannot define Northern Ireland as a foreign country when it comes to trade with Great Britain and claim you've got the United Kingdom out of the EU. You just can't do it. So Boris Johnson...
at least they managed to get it past the first post, which was the problem that we were having with the likes of Theresa May. So at least we got to the point where we have Brexited, but there are other elements of Brexit that weren't done, and I will absolutely concede that. But that wasn't necessarily through want of trying. Remember, it takes two to tango on this one. So in your view, then, ultimately, democracy, you believe it's not dead, but do you think it's been tweaked a little bit by some?
I think democracy is very much under pressure. And the other thing I just want to go back to is quantitative easing, the printing of money. It was the printing of money by the Bank of England which enabled the government to take the extreme policy of lockdown. And by the way, the main reason we've got the cost of living crisis right now is because of lockdowns. And without the printing of money, they wouldn't have been able to lock us down. Sorry, I'm just going to round this off, if I may. The printing of money was perhaps the most undemocratic move by any central bank. It robbed... All right.
Well, let me bring Peter. Ben, stay right there. I'm also joined by a former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Peter, your view, democracy. Do you think is this a Tory stitch-up, in your view?
It's certainly a Tory stitch-up. I wouldn't say democracy is dead, and we've got to be mindful that there are people in other parts of the world who are fighting for the right to vote or trying to vote against the barrel of the gun. So Britain is a free country, thank goodness for that. But I think the Tories have shown indifference and occasionally contempt for the British people. Yes, there are rebellions and coups in all parties, and in my party, the Labour Party, we've not been immune to that, although it tends to be more in opposition. But the point is, we've had two prime ministers in this parliament, but we're already onto the third economic policy, because there was Boris Johnson's economic policy, then there was Liz Truss's economic policy, and although she remains prime minister, her economic policy was ousted 4 or 5 days ago, and it's someone else's, a mixture of Jeremy Hunt's and a compromise with the backbenchers. So my concern, and this is perhaps less about left and right and it is more about democracy, that the government, once again, is controlled by Conservative backbenchers. So it's not even the whole of the parliamentary party. It is a bit like in Theresa May's days, the leadership having their hands tied by the Tory backbenchers who are not representative of society at large because they fear a confidence vote, a collapse, and then a general election. And of course, these are not arcane arguments about the Constitution because, one, you have an unelected Prime Minister, but there's a precedent for that, clearly. But secondly, the whole time this plotting and overt fighting is going on, less and less is being done to tackle the number one issue, which is the economic crisis. And that trumps even the constitutional arguments. There's an economic crisis, but the Conservatives are inward focused rather than looking to support Britons.
Well, what did the Labour Party say about it then? Because as far as I've seen them putting out a load of posters and laughing at the Tory party, which is fine, but I haven't mentioned haven't really heard much of what they are going to be doing about it.
Well, it's perfectly reasonable in opposition that you campaign, and you can't do much else other than campaign and announce policies. But to give you a couple, and some of the best ones from Labour have been lifted. So we've had the energy windfall tax, which Jacob Rees-Mogg said was not a windfall tax, but it was a windfall tax. That was a Labour idea. Then I was
it depends how far back you go. Well, it depends how far back you go, because the Conservative Party have had windfall taxes as well. So, that's just a policy that they suggested, and eventually the Tory Party were forced into doing it.
What would Labour do? And very briefly, I was at Labour conference. Keir Starmer announced Great British Energy, a new energy company, which personally I would love to see, because I do believe there is, in some industries, not all of them certainly, a case for national ownership. But, you're right to say, what are Labour doing? But the answer is, I'd say, if you're churning out energy policies in an energy crisis, then those are the necessary and right answers.
Well, let's bring Ben back in on this, because Ben's been waiting patiently. Ben, now you were sort of you were talking about democracy, and in your view, then, do you think it's now time, the only real way? Because I think you did mention that it's time now to have a general election.
It is. I mean, she is undoubtedly, Liz Truss is a lame duck prime minister. She's had the rug pulled out from under her feet by these backbenchers. Jeremy Hunt is effectively running the country. Her agenda's been reversed. She hasn't got control of Parliament. She may have notionally a 76-seat majority, but she can't control it. And we've got 12 years of Conservative Party government, and they are behaving appallingly. As a parliamentary party, they are behaving appallingly, and they should be held to account now by the people.
Yeah. A final word to you, Ben. Sorry, Peter.
Thanks. I don't think we want a general election straight away. But, the national interest means resolving the economic crisis and trying to help households. If you're the opposition, you always want a general election tomorrow, but Keir Starmer has not called for one. Let's sort out the economic and the energy crisis, get the new Prime Minister in place, and then, she or he can take on the Labour Party, hopefully early next year.
Well, thank you so much, Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List, and also Ben Habib. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much. If you just joined me, welcome aboard. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Ian says, when even the most lightweight of democratic processes gets overturned by globalist elites, what do we have left? You see, now, I'm kind of in agreement with you. I think that democracy is almost dead. It feels like there's a load of people shifting things to make whatever they want happen. Liam says no, but the existing parties are. People need to have the guts to vote for real change. The voting system allows it. We just need to do it. Stella says democracy is dead, along with honesty, integrity, responsibility, morality, service to others. In fact, most things proper and decent. Well, that's your view. Keep them coming. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. 33 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. After the break, we'll continue with the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel. Consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also former editor at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. At 5, of course, it's time for Outside. I'm speaking to former Mrs. Brown star and actor Gary Hollywood. With the show, he's won 5 BAFTAs and 5 NTAs on National Television Awards. And following his exit from the series, he's now turned his attention to the drinks industry. He'll be joining me in the studios to talk about that live in Outside. First, though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has met the Prime Minister at Chequers to discuss plans to fix the economy. Jeremy Hunt is overhauling his predecessor's mini-budget after saying it went too far, too fast. He warns the country faces a difficult period, with tax cuts not coming as quickly as people want, and spending could be squeezed to help balance the books. Just Stop Oil protesters have vandalised an Aston Martin showroom in central London. Demonstrators sat on Park Lane, some gluing themselves to the road, while another activist sprayed orange paint over the luxury car maker's building. The group is demanding the government halts all new oil and gas licences. Well, meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion is also staging a demo, marching in Parliament Square. It comes as the Home Secretary announces plans to crack down on protests that cause serious disruption and threaten public safety. Suella Braverman says police will be given new powers to take a more proactive approach, specifically targeting tactics used by some climate activists. The government is pushing ahead with a law to keep Britain moving during transport strikes. Legislation will be introduced to ensure minimum service levels during walkouts. However, unions say it will be unworkable. The measures are expected to come into force next year. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome back. Don't forget, you can also stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Now, back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? Reports are suggesting that Tory MPs are continuing to plot to oust Prime Minister Liz Truss, as those rebelling are seeking to install former Chancellor Rishi Sunak or even Defence Secretary Ben Wallace as the next Prime Minister. Many argue this undermines the democratic nature and mandate of the government, as changing Chancellor and possibly Prime Minister without voters or votes from either party or the people could spark great controversies. So for this hour, I'm asking, is democracy dead in the UK? So joining me to discuss that is my panel, consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Right, democracy. It's a strange old word, Andrew. What do you think? Is it still existing in our politics in this country?
Yeah, but it's being kicked around a bit, isn't it? I mean, what did the country think when the Tory party dumped a Prime Minister who'd won the biggest majority since 1987 in Boris Johnson, because he was... We know he had problems with the truth. He didn't always get to the point of...
It happens. They all lie, though, by the looks of it.
Well, and so then they replace him with a woman, Truss, who barely got a third of MPs, but the party members liked her, and there are about 170,000 chose the next. Are they really going to dump another Prime Minister and put the country through another unedifying Tory leadership contest? That will appear to people watching this TV today, and it will not look terribly democratic, will it? It will look like the behaviour of a cult. They're starting to behave like a cult. If she's going, the only way they can get away with it is if they have a coronation of a Prime Minister, no election, no delay, and then he or she gets on with it quickly. But I think it would be a terrible optic to do it again. Whatever you think of Liz Truss, and she's more wooden than this table. Actually, this table's not wooden.
Sort of MDF, but I mean, she's not even that.
No, she's not a great communicator. She's a poor communicator. We know that. She was a disaster in that press conference the other day. She's not bad in the House of Commons, actually, but she's looking like she's been she looks terrified, actually. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, she does, and that's what is worrying me.
that's scary.
I want someone that's strong and a leader, and at the moment I'm looking at a woman who is like having a very public nervous breakdown from it. I mean, I actually do feel sorry for her because I wouldn't want to wake up this morning and see the newspaper front pages, and you know, and what her husband is where they're at Chequers, aren't they, this weekend? I mean, you know, a nightmare constantly. How is she getting any sleep? But I mean, back to the question: is democracy dead in the UK? Well, technically, no, it's not, because we're in this situation we're in because of the way our democratic democracy actually works. I mean, we don't vote for a leader in this country, we vote for a political party. And in 2019, we, the country, not we personally, we voted for the Conservative Party. We still have the Conservative Party in charge. Now, we don't elect a president. I mean, look, obviously it's quite clear that a lot of people voted for the Conservatives because they like Boris Johnson. It was his personality rather than his policies, I expect. But we're not voting for a leader. We are voting for a manifesto put forward by a political party. That political party is still in charge.
Yeah, but the manifesto has changed.
The manifesto has changed.
And that's what they were elected for, democratic.
Yes, that's on a daily basis. That just has changed. I mean, obviously, because so many other things have happened, obviously, since then. We've had, obviously, the COVID thing, the Ukraine invasion. But the party is what we vote for. We don't vote for a leader. We're not America, not yet. So, in theory, technically, democracy is not dead. However, the way it's going at the moment... But what's the answer? Do we go to the country and have a general election there? I think we're all pretty much agreed that would be a disaster.
Not another one.
Well, exactly, with the winter coming up. Or do we ask everybody, who would you like to see leading this party? I mean, how long is that going to take? What a mess.
But the problem here is, first of all, what they're doing is not what they were elected to do. And then when Liz Truss got in, she changed what we'd agreed them to do and decided what she was going to do. And then she was elected for what she was going to do, but then her party have decided that that's not what they want to do, which is nothing to do with what we want. And so it feels like they're just, as you said, it's like a cult. They've decided, oh, we're going to do this, we don't like her, we're going to get rid of her. They were elected on a mandate, which they are not following. They were also elected because of a leader, which they have got rid of. And even when Boris won the no confidence vote, they wanted to change the rules so that they didn't have to wait for a year. And I think they have to wait a certain period with Liz Truss. But now they're going to try and get rid of her in some way.
Well, they have to wait another year, but they can get around the rules.
But can they change that rule? They can change that, can't they?
Well, I read a fascinating quote in one of the Sunday papers today. If Sir Graham Brady, who's the chairman, and the officers of the 1922 say, no, we cannot change the rules, it would be unfair. The MP was quoted saying, well, we'll get rid of him and we'll put some officers in the 1922 who well. And I laughed out loud and I thought, my God, this is a banana republic.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The rules aren't, we don't like the rules, we'll change them. We'll shoot the people. I mean, this is madness.
Well, they had a go at Boris for trying to change rules to something he wanted, but they were doing exactly the same thing. So it just feels like they literally are power hungry. They get in and then they just do whatever they want. And if what is happening they're not happy with, they just change the rules again.
It's like a death cult.
It can't be. Something has to give. Something has to happen.
But what's going to give, Nana? That's the question. That's the question I think everybody watching and listening today and everybody sitting here is like, what is the answer to where we are now? And we were saying in the break, Andrew, it's like, I've never been as depressed by politics in this country in my entire lifetime. Because I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what I want to happen, what should happen. I know that if there was a general election tomorrow or next week or whenever, I wouldn't have a clue who to vote for.
No.
I really wouldn't. I mean, politically homeless.
We don't know what Keir Starmer
Well, he won't tell us.
Because he won't tell us.
No.
Because he's just relying on the Tories to screw up, and by God, they're doing that job for him.
And plus, I mean, this isn't even a political point. It's like, because I'm not a political animal per se, but Labour are just as divided. They're hiding it quite well at the moment, but I mean, we know there's huge divisions in that party.
That Corbyn wing of the party is still enormous.
They're still there, and Angela Rayner is deputy.
Yeah.
She came out with those comments of scum and he turned Banana Republic. You can't speak like that. It's just not acceptable on any level as a leader or anything. If my daughter spoke in that way, I'd tell her to wash her mouth out with soap and get out of my house.
Well, especially in the light of David Amos's...
I know. But we also had that Labour MP a few weeks ago, Rupert Huck, saying that he's not a real black man. Superficially
No.
I mean,
oh my God.
How many other Labour MPs hold those sort of views?
Well, she sat there with others around her, saying that out loud.
And she wasn't. She was called up by a panellist, but not an MP.
No.
She's had the whip suspended. She's still in the
there.
Labour Party.
Well, she apologised.
Eventually.
Eventually,
Not
yes, she
initially.
apologised. And the interesting thing was that Sadiq Khan said, even he admitted that what she said was racist, but then he said, but she's not a racist. And in my view, if you're going to say things that are racist,
that makes
then
you
that
racist.
Makes you a racist. I mean, what's the division? You can say stuff, but then you're not really racist, but it's OK, I can say that. No. What you said was racist. That makes you racist. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
And when you've understood that, then you can try and re-educate yourself on what racism is.
Yeah, well, quite.
So that's the worry with the Labour Party. What's going on behind those carefully
very, very
manufactured-looking Keir Starmer? So this is the steady, boring, grey man, but that's perhaps what the country wants. But what's going on those backbenches? And what do they really think?
Well, you've only got to look at the way Angela Rayner looks at him sometimes.
She don't like him.
I wouldn't want her behind me.
Well, I mean, also he doesn't quite know what a woman is, which is interesting.
Does can a man have a cervix, Keir Starmer?
I don't know.
Well, he apparently thinks he can.
We'll tell you what, the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices onto the show. It's their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Right, where should we head? Should we go to Grimsby? Let's go to Grimsby. Let's have a chat with Alan McNeely. Al. You can call me Al. Hello, Al. How are you doing?
Hello, Nana. I'm fine, thank you.
Well, we're discussing it. We don't know what to do. I mean, do you think democracy in this country is dead?
It's certainly under a lot of pressure, Nana. But it's under pressure not just from within, from people who would like to have a dictatorship, but it seems to be under pressure from outside the country as well. People like the World Economic Forum, a lot of the globalists, they see COVID, I think, as an opportunity to exploit the situation. So it's definitely under a lot of pressure.
But it's not dead. Do you think it's still living quite happily? Well, we shall see about that, because let's see what they do with this trust, and then we'll know. Alan, thank you very much. That's Alan McNeely there in Grimsby. Right, so today I'm asking... Thank you very much, Al. So I'm asking you, what do you think? Is democracy dead? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Steve says, we've never had democracy. It was always an illusion. See, now I'm inclined to agree with him, because I think democracy is an illusion. Because there's a load of people at the top pulling the strings, and we think we've got something to say about it. It's like the Matrix.
So does any country around the world get it right then? What is the perfect democracy?
It's tricky, isn't it? I mean, the idea of communism is a sort of good idea, but unfortunately there are people at the top. So that's how it doesn't work.
Communism and fascism, same thing, really.
Same thing. It doesn't work. Right, let's see who else is... Michael. Michael says, in my opinion, no free speech means no democracy. Sarah says our MPs have forgotten who they actually work for. They work for the taxpayer, not for themselves. I honestly feel our MPs are completely useless and need to leave all their egos at home. I agree. I think they're pretty bad. But not all of them, because some of them come on the show and I don't want them all to disappear.
We've got to be careful not to go down the Angela Rayner route of the scum thing here.
Exactly.
I mean, David Amos, Joe Cox, I mean, not all MPs are out for themselves. Some of them are, on both sides, are incredibly hard-working, incredibly dedicated to the constituents, and we have to be careful. Some of the rhetoric used about politicians at the moment, mostly by politicians, is dangerous.
Well, that's true. Well, there's a poll up on Twitter throughout the show asking, is democracy dead in the UK? And currently, 86% of you say yes and only 16% of you say no. I happen to agree with you. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it's time for Worldview. According to reports, Iran is planning to send powerful missiles to the Russian army, further heightening tensions in the region. And as the war drags on, is Putin's cloak of invincibility starting to wear off? All of that after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, where have you been? This is GB News, we're live. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now it's now time for Worldview. And let's head over to Russia, because today we're going to speak to our political commentator and Russian specialist, Danny Armstrong. So Danny, thank you very much for joining me. Obviously here in the UK, but we're over to Russia to see. So apparently there's something about Iran supplying Russians with weapons. Is that a true thing? Is that something that's actually happening?
Yeah, of course. It's kind of can be considered an escalation of Iran providing Russia with ballistic missiles and suicide drones. It's not something we haven't seen before. Of course, those revenge strikes by Russia for the Crimean Bridge attack were perpetrated by those Iranian drones. Zelensky said a lot of the air defense systems in Ukraine shot them down, but they did manage to kill a lot of people in civilian areas, many towns, including Kiev as well. But those ballistic missiles and suicide drones being supplied by Iran, of course, one of the big Eastern allies to Russia in quite large quantities as well.
You think they wouldn't want to get involved in that way, especially with Putin appearing to lose his popularity. Is that true now? Are more people starting to think that we had somebody Ivan live from Russia on Friday, and he said that people, even the patriots, are starting to lose sort of favour for Putin. Is this?
Well, it's a fantastic question. It's a fantastic point, because Vladimir Putin, we have seen the kind of popular, the faith in him, those people that blindly follow him and believe he's the man to restore Russia to the status of the USSR. That belief is starting to wane, and they're starting to doubt whether he's the man to do it. He said at a summit in Astana over the weekend that it's not the time for a major strike on Ukraine. We don't know whether he's trying to buy time. He also said that what is happening in Ukraine isn't nice, and that's putting it mildly, but it's exactly what Russia would have got in a couple of months' time or later, just in worse conditions for them. Now, people do repeat that rhetoric and that justification, and they have done since the invasion. But that public opinion and that blind faith in Putin, remember, he's been in power for 22 years. It's hard not to feel invincible, but it's waning, and that aura of invincibility is just slipping just a little bit.
That is a good thing. Hopefully that will continue. Well, if you just join me, welcome aboard. This is GB News. That was, of course, Danny Armstrong. He's a political commentator. Right, let's head over to America now. Let's have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. He's there live now for us. Paul, welcome on board. Now, lots of things happening in America at the moment. January the 6th, Congressional Committee, they voted unanimously to subpoena Donald Trump to testify. Tell me more.
Yeah, this is the witch hunt committee. There's no doubt about it. They know they could have done without even holding a committee. They know what the answer is. They're going to find him guilty. But this week, the committee, surprise, surprise, unanimously decided they voted to subpoena Donald Trump to appear before it. And the brilliant thing is, he hasn't officially announced this, but he said, yeah, all right, I'll probably do it. But that's not official, but this is word coming from his camp. That he's like, yeah, okay, I'll come and testify. But his only condition is that he wants to do it live on TV, which is just going to be the greatest show on earth if he manages to do it. The fact of the matter is he probably will never have to testify. He is going to last longer than the actual Congress as it stands at the moment. So we have the midterm elections on November the 8th, the committee itself is going to get wound up and probably be replaced by a committee investigating the result of the 2020 election. And so the whole thing is just a circus, but it's so brilliant. Trump is just hilarious.
Well, it's true, because then they can't edit it if he does it live. He can say what he likes, and they don't want to risk it, frankly, because then, well, they can't edit it. So what's all this about Joe Biden? He's got a nerve. He's labelling Liz Truss's economic plan a mistake.
I know, Joe Biden wading in and commenting on economics. It's a bit like Rebecca Vardy giving legal advice. It's the I know, he's managed to turn former Vice President Joe Biden has said that trickle-down economics don't work. They worked fine for Reagan, and apparently that was the boom time of the American economy. But he said that they don't work. He has managed to turn an oil exporting country into a country where I'm now paying potentially over $8 a gallon in the US. So he really, basically, his handlers have put him in a lane, and he should stay in it. Because he honestly, economics is not his strong suit. We're still waiting to find out what his strong suit is, and hopefully that will become apparent over the next couple of years. But yes, economics is not something he should be leading with or advising anybody on.
No, he shouldn't be advising anybody about anything. Paul Dudridge, thank you very much. He's the host of the Politics People podcast, right? And lastly, let's turn our attention to Iran and talk with Maya Tousi about the latest that is happening there. Maya, thank you very much for joining me. Now, we've heard about clashes last night. Can you just give us a little bit of background and what's happening?
Yes, so this prison, Evin prison in the capital, Tehran, holds thousands of political prisoners. And obviously, this is the 30th day of the uprising, the anti-Islamic regime uprising in Iran. Last night, it started as a bit of a fire, then fire in prison, and then turn into gunshots, and gunshots turn into explosions. And there are videos that's been verified that shows some objects, missile-looking objects, being dropped inside the prison courtyard, and that escalated everything. And of course, the regime are saying that it was just a little bit of a riot inside the prison randomly, but of course, there are a lot of people from the opposition side, the freedom fighters, who are saying, don't forget that in the 70s, when the revolution was happening, there's similar thing happened when the Islamic nutters decided to burn down cinema racks and blame it on normal people and the Shah of Iran. So a lot of people lost their lives. Over 70 prisoners have now escaped and been rescued.
No, that's not good. Why did they start the riots and fire? What is the reasoning? Some people might be asking.
If the theories are right, that is the regime doing it themselves, like before. It's not the first time we've done this, and there are indications because we've got confirmation that the son of the former president, Rafsanjani, who was in prison over financial corruption, was told to stay away from prison. They actually got him out the days before this happened. The intention, if it is that, then it's basically a tactic to create propaganda to say, look, these are not legitimate protesters. These are the CIA and Mossad thugs who are coming here to burn down our prisons. That's basically it.
Wow. Well, listen, Maya, thank you very much for keeping us abreast of that. Thank you so much. That is, of course, Maya Tousi. That was Worldview. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. This is GBNews. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget, you can stream us live on YouTube, or why not download the GBNews app. I'm Nana Akua. More to come in the next hour. So good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. If you've just joined me, where on earth have you been? For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Now, at the top of the hour in Outside, I'll be talking to BAFTA-winning actor Gary Hollywood, famed for his role on the popular TV series Mrs. Brown's Boys. And then, stay with me, because for our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? All of that on the way. But first, it's coming up to 5 o'clock. Let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's almost 5 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has met the Prime Minister at Chequers to discuss plans to fix the economy. Jeremy Hunt is overhauling his predecessor's mini-budget after saying it went too far, too fast. He warns the country faces a difficult period, with tax cuts not coming as quickly as people want, and spending could be squeezed to help balance the books. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds is calling for a general election.
It's not about a change of Chancellor. Look, they can't simply reverse what they've done through something as straightforward as that. They can't simply get around the fact that the Bank of England and the government have been in completely different places for the last month. They've got to recognise what they have done requires the chance for a real fresh start, and that will require a general election.
Just Stop Oil protesters have vandalised an Aston Martin showroom in central London. Demonstrators sat on Park Lane, some gluing themselves to the road, while another activist sprayed orange paint over the luxury car maker's building. The group is demanding the government halts all new oil and gas licences. Well, meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion is also staging a demonstration, marching in Parliament Square today. It comes as the Home Secretary announced plans to crack down on protests that cause serious disruption and threaten public safety. Suella Braverman says police will be given new powers to take a more proactive approach, specifically targeting tactics used by some climate activists. The government is pushing ahead with a law to keep Britain moving during transport strikes. Legislation will be introduced to ensure minimum service levels are maintained during a walkout. Unions criticise the move, which they say will be unworkable. The measures are expected to come into force next year. Travel expert Simon Calder says there are practical problems that need to be worked out first.
If you say, right, we're going to run 40% of trains, who decides which ones those are, and who decides who's allowed to go on them, because they're all going to fill up. So there's lots of problems associated with it. And as you were saying, it's not going to come until next year anyway, if it gets through a very divided Parliament. And it will be interesting to see how it does work and whether you can actually do this.
Firefighters have been tackling a large blaze in Glasgow. Scottish Fire and Rescue was called to Kingston Street in the Tradeston area just before 10 o'clock this morning. People were being advised to close their windows and stay away from the site. There are no reports of any injuries. In international news, Iran says 4 inmates have been killed and 61 injured in a fire at Tehran's Evin prison. The jail is notorious for holding political prisoners. The blaze comes amid ongoing unrest following the death of Mahsa Amini. The 22-year-old died in custody after violating the country's strict dress code for women. Security officials say calm has now been restored at the facility. And back home, more than 1,000 Paddington bears left as a tribute to the late Queen have found a new home. An image of the Queen consort has been released to mark their donation to children's charity Barnardo's. The toys were left at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle by mourners in the days after Queen Elizabeth's death was announced. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pierce, and also former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Still to come, at the top of the hour, it's Outside with former Mrs. Brown's Boys star and actor Gary Hollywood. Now, the show's won 5 BAFTAs and 5 National Television Awards. We'll talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. He'll be in the studio. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? According to the report, NHS hospitals are increasing spending on spin doctors as patient waiting lists hit record levels. Is the health service distributing funds in the correct places? Then at 5:50, I'll be taking a look at another story that caught my eye. Comedian Eddie Izzard has launched her campaign to stand as a Labour MP, but the bid has been marred in controversy. Izzard, who was born male, now identifies as a woman, so could be placed on a all-female shortlist. OK, tell me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So it is now time for Outside, and I'm speaking to former Mrs. Brown's Boys star and actor Gary Hollywood, who played Dino Doyle, the hairdresser and boyfriend of Rory Brown. Now, with Mrs. Brown's Boys, Gary helped win 5 BAFTAs and 5 National Television Awards, 3 TV Choice Awards, 4 IFTA Awards and 3 TV Times Awards. Wow. Now, with a career lasting over 4 decades, he doesn't look old enough, Gary made his first appearance on an episode of Taggart. I used to love that. There's been a murder. His big break came at 15, playing Dominic Dunbar in the Scottish soap opera Take the High Road. I used to love that. Take the High Road. Since his departure from Mrs. Brown's Boys, Gary founded his own spirits brand called Hollywood Drinks. And I'm pleased to say Gary joins me live in the studio now. Gary!
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
This is where it all happens.
Is it now? Take the High Road. I used to love that when I was younger. I used to watch it all the time. What was it like in that little village that they were at? What was it like?
Oh, it was lovely. Yeah, I started that when I was 14.
Oh, wow.
And, grew up watching that as a child, and my mum was so proud because that was her favourite soap at the time. And yeah, I would like to think that that's where my training all started. It was tough going. Everyone thinks that soap opera is easy to do, but 3 episodes a week, 18 hours a day, and that's where the training began.
But what did you do for school?
Well, we juggle school as well, so we'd have a tutor, and you'd have to be doing your classwork as well as learning scripts, as well as doing all the camera moves, and then get that off back to school. So yeah, it was tough going, but hey, here we are 30 years later.
Wow. You know, when I think about Take the High Road, I keep seeing sort of like stoned walls with stone, made out of stones, like big bricks and stuff. That's what I remember about it. People talking over these walls, like, I don't know.
Hello there.
Hello there.
And their little quiet voices.
Well, so, God, you were young then.
Yeah, so we started acting when I was 12. I was lucky enough through primary school into high school. I got picked up. My drama teachers, Terry and Mandy, had put me up for Taggart. Nobody move, there's been a murder.
So you met him, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Oh, what was he like?
He was lovely, such a genuine guy, and yeah, I was 12 at the time.
I used to love watching. I used to wait for it. Chief Inspector Taggart. Taggart, can you do that? Can you do it, Chief Inspector?
Chief Inspector Taggart.
Oh,
there you go. So yeah, started that, then into soap, and then did a movie, The Winter Guest, with Emma Thompson and the late, lovely Alan Rickman.
So you've been around some big names. Emma Thompson, she's a big name.
And Alan, God love him, lovely man. And then moved in from Pantos with the Crankies.
My God, Nicola Sturgeon herself.
we Nicky Sturgeon herself, yes. And of course, my claim to fame was falling off the beanstalk with Jeanette. I was, myself and her involved in the collision.
Were you meant to fall off the
well, people think I was paid to do it, but there we go, that's a different story.
Really?
But, yeah, and then...
What was that about? Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, it was just a matinee show, and the mechanicals that we were on just folded, and don't really remember much about it, and I was concussed. And for Jeanette, God love her, she was badly damaged in the accident.
Really?
And I've never done panto since, needless to say, but yes, so that was at the panto days, and then of course through panto I met Brendan O'Carroll, which then led me on to Mrs. Brown's Boys.
No, I'll tell you, I'll give you a confession about that.
Yes.
I can't bear it. At Christmas, I'm like, oh, not this again.
Well, at least you're honest.
Bear it.
At least
but
you're
somehow
honest.
End up watching it. It's so annoying. I'm like, oh, not this again.
Not this again. But we always did say that it's Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. And yeah, needless to say, I had 20 years with Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Wow.
And of course, with touring up and down the country and over to Australia and New Zealand and all over the world, and very thankful.
Did you? So you toured with Mrs. Brown's
huge
Boys?
all over,
Really?
and very thankful to it.
How did you get that gig?
I met himself doing panto at the Pavilion in Glasgow. He said, "What are you doing?" I had just left the soap opera. He said, "What are you doing after this?" And I said, "I'm heading down to London. I've got the bill." Remember the bill?
Oh, the bill.
The
Do you know
bill
when I
was
used to
lined
watch
up.
the feet? Do you ever watch the feet?
Yeah, that's it.
They
Did you get it right?
They were exactly in sync. And I was like, Are these mechanical feet, or are they mechanical feet, or are they actual feet?
Are they actual feet?
Are they actual mechanical feet? Or feet?
I haven't a clue.
Well, that's what I thought. They were so in time.
No, they were real feet, were they?
I don't know. It's just they were so in time that I was like, these have got to be mechanical feet. They can't be like real feet.
But I was I was off to the Bill, possibly with 6 months' work or whatever. And Brendan has said he'd written a show and there's a year's work. And my children were young at the time, so I thought, a year's work. Let's go for it. And 20 years later. Wow. And we had our ups and downs, and needless to say, we've moved on from that. And
does that mean you didn't get on in the end? You sort of parted ways?
Yeah, we
in a bad way.
We didn't part ways in the best.
What happened?
It's all over the press.
Oh, I don't
Just
know.
Google it.
No, tell it.
But so there was disagreements, and
About what?
there was disagreements, and I made the decision that I was just going to go.
But you've done well out of it. It's been 20 years.
It was 20 years and ups and downs, and with great memories, and that's what I'm going to take with. And as I said, things change and we move on. And out of that then came me setting up my own gin company.
Why did you go for gin? I never used to like gin. I can remember one time I drank gin and I ended up crying on the steps at a party. And people said, Nana, why are you crying? I had no idea.
And listen, I need to get you some of mine. It won't make you cry, I don't think so. But so I started the gin. Not that I'm a raving alcoholic, but yes, I do enjoy a gin or two. And with everything happening in this country at the moment...
Oh, God, we all need a gin.
You don't need gin to make you cry. But yeah, I started the gin, which has led on to a rum, and we're working on, hopefully to launch in Christmas time, our own vodka.
Oh, really? Why? Why did you go for that?
It was just, something, Nana, it was on my bucket list. And my wife said, why not do it? And so I got in touch with people that know people, and not who you know, what you know, as my mother would say. And we set up. So we've been the gin's been running for 2 years, and with the rum, and now we're working on the vodka. So it was just a bucket list, tick the boxes, and then get that up and running, and something to leave for the children.
That's very good.
Make them rich in alcohol.
Exactly. My mother says it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
I love it.
She's right, So you've got this business now. You've got this gin company. Is it successful? Is it doing well?
It's doing well at the moment. It's just all online sales, and I've changed distillery. We based it in Leicester, and now I'm moving up to Scotland just because I've moved back to Scotland. I'd spent 8 years in Lanzarote.
Scotland's lovely, is it gorgeous?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And Mum and Dad are getting on, so I wanted to move back to Scotland, and so we're moving everything from Leicester with the gin and the distillery to Glasgow, so that I can be more hands-on with it and take it from there. But at the moment it's all going well. A couple of projects. Hopefully I'll come back and we'll be able to talk about them.
Are you writing a book?
Well, listen, I'm looking for. That's it. I'm looking for the book. Yeah, why not?
You should write a book. I think. Thank you. You sound kind of interesting.
Oh, it would be very interesting.
Especially like to find out what happened with Mrs. Brown's boys. No, I can't watch that. I simply can't watch it because it was an ex whose house I went to.
Oh,
We're obviously not together now. It didn't go well. Never does.
And was that the cause of the breakup? Was watching Mrs.
I couldn't bear it. It's after going to their house for one Christmas, it was just literally on repeat. I couldn't take it anymore. Literally. But no, it's really good to talk to you and find out what you...
Listen, thank you so much. I'm desperate to see you and to be here, so thank you for having me.
And just very briefly, how was lockdown for you? Were you working during it, or what did you do?
No, I wasn't working. Oh, that's another story and a half. My son was born prematurely. We were living at Lanzarote at the time. I was then trapped, but in a good way, at Mum and Dad's house with a premature baby.
How early was he?
He was just over a month.
Oh, really?
And you'll be sorry you asked this. And then I lost my brother.
Oh, no.
Non-COVID related. And then I left Mrs. Brown's boys. And all this coming at the one time. So, I was glad to see the back of the lockdown.
Yeah. So your gin company, what's it called then, just in case I want to get some of it myself?
Yeah, it's funny enough, tongue-in-cheek, it was Hollywood Ginge. I had to do get the hair in, Hollywood Ginge, with Hollywood spirits and Hollywood drinks online. So, next time I see you, I shall bring some. I can't
believe you didn't bring anything.
We won't make you cry, I assure you.
Get out.
I'll bring the rum as well, and the vodka. We'll have a party.
We'll have a party.
We'll have Dawn as well, she loves it.
We all need to celebrate in our houses because, frankly, there's politics in this country at the moment.
Oh, don't.
Let's not depress ourselves, Gary.
No, no.
Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure meeting you, and thank you so much for coming in.
Bless you, and all the best.
Appreciate you made the way all the way to the studio as well.
Not at all.
Really
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, that is Gary Hollywood. He's the former star of Mrs. Brown's Boys, and now he's gone into gin making and all sorts of things, which is quite exciting stuff. Good for him. Gary, thank you so much, and stay with me, though, because on the way, the Great British Debate this hour. The question I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? Now, according to reports, NHS hospitals are increasing spending on communication staff or spin doctors as patient waiting lists hit record highs. I mean, you've heard of the net zero managers and diversity and inclusion managers. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And now it's communication managers. I mean, it's just a joke. But what do you think? Is the health service distributing their funds in the correct places, or is this simply more wasting of money? Stay tuned. All that after this.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather wet across the south and west, but drier in the north. Let's take a look at the details. After a dry afternoon, it'll be a wet end to the day as heavy rain moves in from the south with brisk winds. Coastal areas could see gusts of up to 30 miles per hour at times. Skies will cloud over in the south to end the afternoon, followed by some heavy rain this evening. It'll be breezy as the rain arrives, particularly around the coast. It'll also turn wet and windy across Wales this evening as a band of heavy rain moves in from the south. Rain will be fairly light and patchy across the Midlands, although there could be the odd heavier burst at times. Most areas will turn cloudy here with some outbreaks of drizzle. Holding on to some drier weather in northern England this evening, but turning increasingly cloudy. It'll turn chilly across Northumberland before the cloud arrives, with temperatures falling to 4 Celsius. Also staying dry at first across the Scottish borders with clear skies. Heavy rain and stronger winds will arrive later on in the night. A band of heavy rain and brisk winds will sweep across Northern Ireland this evening. Rain will be heavy and persistent for a few hours with a lot of spray on the roads. Bands of rain will continue to move north tonight, bringing strong winds for some. It'll turn drier in the south. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget, download the GB News app. You can watch all of the programmes at your leisure. Right, so it is now time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? NHS hospitals have reportedly increased their spending on spin doctors, and all the meanwhile, waiting lists have hit record highs, as we know. It's, what is it now, 7 million or something like that? Freedom of Information requests have revealed that in 2021 to 2022, the NHS employed 1,000 communication staff, and some of these communication staff have been paid quite handsomely, with many receiving salaries of £108,000 a year. Now, that is a lot of money. Why are the NHS splurging out on spin doctors instead of focusing their attention on frontline workers? With a record 7 million people on NHS waiting lists and 32,000 having to wait more than 12 hours in English A&E departments, our minds do wonder. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? Well, in the studio joining me now is nurse and writer Sarah Palmer. Sarah Palmer, thank you very much. I was admiring you at the eyes and everything. You look great.
Thank you.
Sarah, what is your take on this? You work on the ground, you know all about this. What is your view? Because we're talking, we've got diversity and inclusion, you've got zero managers, you've got communication managers, £108,000 a year. I mean...
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. That salary is far too high, and I think there are far too many of those types of managers, and it's really not necessary. I think the NHS is struggling enough as it is, and I think it could do with cutting out of those types of middle managers and senior managers in roles that just... they're not essential. And I think really people just need some common sense when it comes down to those topics. Something like diversity and inclusion is obviously important, but it comes down to the common sense of the people doing the recruiting and the managers on the wards. And really, if people don't know how to be inclusive, then I think that comes down to a toxic culture within the NHS, and that would be the problem that needs addressing. And I don't think these types of managers are the answer to that problem.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, I mean, at one point they were spending money on rainbow crossings, as I remember. And it seems the NHS, they're always saying, oh, the NHS is funded badly, it needs more money. But then when we see that they're spending money on procurement of tablets and things where they could actually buy them from the corner shop cheaper than what they purchased them for. And they have economies of scale, which simply means they're so large that they could actually buy in bulk and take advantage of that. I don't understand why they don't do that.
No, I don't really either. I think it's an absolute waste of money. And there are so many other issues that cause such a huge loss of money as well. Something like this toxic culture was discussed in a report by Matt Hancock back in 2018, and they collectively estimated that it was 2.28 billion that the NHS is wasting each year as a result of the bullying that happens within the NHS. And that's because of the sickness absence and such a high staff turnover and then loss of workforce productivity. So I think that's a massive issue that needs tackling in order to save money. But as you say, there are other practical things that need to be done. And I don't know why it's so mismanaged right now.
Because they keep asking for more money. And I'm happy with paying more money towards the NHS. I think it's an essential thing. But if I'm giving my money to something, I want to know that the majority of it will be spent well. There is the argument, a lot of people say, yeah, but we spend the most per head. But then we waste one of the most per head as well. So out of a pound, they're losing probably over half of it in waste.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a lot of waste, and there's a lot of things that should be... the money that's being wasted really could go on public health. Public health is a massive issue. And if public health was actually improved and people with diabetes and cardiovascular disease were being cared for and treated more promptly, and also these diseases were being avoided completely, then we wouldn't be seeing such a massive number of people on the waiting list. 7 million is far too high, but it's as a result of... this toxic mixture of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and things like that, preventable diseases that could be managed far better with a better public health approach, I would say.
From where you are and from what you can see, how do you think that communication towards these people can change things? Because, I mean, you must look at this and think, well, who can I speak to about this? Who can I talk to?
I know, it's quite difficult, really. I think they need a root and branch analysis into the entirety of the NHS and its functioning, because at the moment it seems that communication is very difficult to actually tackle these key issues. Everything is so siloed in its own little departments, and nothing... The flow of communication is really... is not very well managed.
Shocking.
Yeah.
They're not getting... Well, that's the thing, because if I wanted to speak to somebody from the NHS, it's actually quite difficult. And some of them will say, oh, no, we're not speaking to you. And it's like, well, we just want to ask you about your spending.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you need to speak to so-and-so, to so-and-so, and so... And everybody's evading answering the question as to why they're wasting the money.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody will answer anything.
Even when it comes to a patient making a complaint. I mean, I made a complaint several months ago. It's still not been dealt with. And I think, you know, things like that, communication just to people... giving them a voice to actually being able to complain. There's a service for it, but the service doesn't deal with the complaint, and then nothing gets done. And it's the same with the whole economical side of management of the NHS as well. There's a lot that... Yeah, there's a lot that could be improved when it comes down to the communication side of things.
But they'll probably spend it on getting a manager to deal with the communication.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the massive problems. They'll just get more managers in.
Why do they do this? I mean, it's so obvious to you and me.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. Look,
it is.
Diversity and inclusion. Look, that person's black, that person's white. Hang on a minute, we've got a staff full of people who are all cookie cutters, all look the same. Let's get some people who are slightly different. Can they do the job? All that.
Yeah.
What is wrong with people? Why do they need to be sort of spoon-fed the most obvious?
It should be something that everybody in the NHS workforce is aware of, diversity and inclusion. It should be part of your own common sense.
Yes.
If you haven't got that, then why are you in the job?
Shouldn't be
you should be able to have that naturally.
Well, Sarah, stay right there, because I'm also joined now by a consultancy surgeon, Tony Hinton. Tony, thank you very much. Welcome to the show. Tony, I want to ask...
Good evening, Nana.
Do you think that too much money has been spent on things like backroom staff?
Absolutely. I'll give you just one example. For 3 years, I was the head of department in a large London teaching hospital. And after my first few weeks in the job, a business manager came to speak to me to say we needed to do a new business plan. And I said, well, we're not a business, are we? And she said, oh, no, we have to do this every 5 years. And I said, well, that's fine then. I've never done a business plan, so let's have a starting point of the business plan from 5 years ago, see what targets were fulfilled and what plans were made and what has been done. 2 weeks later, she came back to me to tell me, no one could find a copy of the business plan from 5 years ago. And I said, well, I'm not wasting my time doing a plan that no one ever looks at. You can do the business plan, I'll get on and see the patients. And those sorts of things happen all the time. So it's not just that these extra managers aren't needed, they actually interfere with the frontline staff trying to do their job. It's not the biggest problem, I would say, the NHS has at the moment. The NHS actually, I think, doesn't need more money. It's social care that needs more money. There's up to 25% now of patients in hospital that are fit and well enough to go home, but they cannot go home because there is no social care to look after them for the first few weeks at home. There are no places in care homes for them because the government sacked 40,000 staff. And that is what needs to be addressed. You can put as much money as you want into the NHS until you sort out social care and get patients to be able to be discharged from hospital, then you won't correct the problems with the ambulance queues and the extended times for people to wait to get an ambulance if they have a stroke or a heart attack.
But who's going to do that then? Because presumably there'll be some more admin staff required for all of that.
Well, that's always the case. Whenever there are problems, I mean, the current waiting list issues, instead of addressing the obvious thing, which is social care, there will be extra managers put in place to manage the waiting list. And there's all sorts of strange things that I've heard of in the past, like departments where they'll ask patients, have they got any dates when they're going to be on holiday? And then what happens is they'll send the patient an invitation to come in for their operation when they know they're on holiday. And then what will happen is that patient will go to the back of the waiting list or be taken off the waiting list because they didn't turn up for their operation. It's just ridiculous. If people go to the Together Declaration website, they'll be able to sign a letter that we're sending to the current health secretary. Of course, with what's happening with Liz Truss, who knows how long this person will be the current health secretary, to say the staff that were sacked from social care need to be reinstated. and they need to be compensated. And we need a plan going forwards to manage the NHS waiting list and the social care as one problem, because it's one and the same problem.
Well, let's bring in Sarah, because you mentioned something about waiting lists, and that they're asked in terms of what day they're going on holiday, and then when you tell them, they sort of book the operation there. Sarah, have you ever heard of that?
Sorry, can you just repeat?
What Tony was saying was that sometimes they book for the NHS waiting lists. They'll find out what day you're going on holiday. So just say you need to get an operation done,
right.
and they actually wait and find out what day you're going, and then they book the appointment then. So then you have to go to the back of the waiting list. Is that a practice that you've heard of?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cancellations of people that have been unnecessarily booked in, and then absolutely, when the annual leave is booked, then everyone gets cancelled and then moved to the back of the list, and it just goes on for a very long time. Some people have been waiting 18 months for a cardiac procedure, I believe, from the notes that I was looking at. So yeah, it's a real problem, the waiting list.
Well, you think that they might sort of focus their money on that than getting communications managers. But Sarah, in your view, are these managers actually needed, though, on some level?
I think on some level, managers are needed. I was looking at the NHS Confederation website. They said earlier this year that they think these managers are needed for the efficiency, quality and patient satisfaction side of things. So they think that actually it takes a lot of the work out of the hands of the frontline staff. And I think there is an argument to say that certain clerical management could be required. I mean, for a ward to run smoothly, you really do need a clerical manager, and you need people in the background running things, because otherwise the people on the front line, they don't have the time to do that. So there's an argument for certain levels of management, but I think they could do a root and branch analysis and see which ones could be cut out, and then they can save some money that way.
Interesting stuff. Tony, your final word to you.
Well, I would say there are far too many managers. I would think they could be cut by half. And actually, I think a lot of the management actually make work for frontline staff and take frontline staff off the patient care that they're trying to do.
Well, listen, Tony, thank you very much for your thoughts, Tony Hinton, and also Sarah Palmer. Thank you so much for joining me both. Really good to talk to you. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. I'm asking you whether the NHS is spending too much money on backroom staff. Robert says absolutely they need to sort out their priorities when it comes to spending. Alex says the NHS employs 1.3 million, of which about 375,000 are office staff. Not a good ratio at all. Ron says not backroom staff, but many other areas. The systems are inefficient and very time-consuming. So lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Keep all of those coming, because we love hearing them. You know the coup. It is at GBNews, at GBViews, at gbnews.uk. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? And it all comes after it was revealed that the NHS has increased spending on spin doctors. You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, consultant editor of the Daily Mail and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson and Andrew Pearce. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:32. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor has met the Prime Minister at Chequers to discuss plans to fix the economy. Jeremy Hunt is overhauling his predecessor's mini-budget after saying it went too far too fast. He warns the country faces a difficult period, with tax cuts not coming as quickly as people want, and spending could be squeezed to help balance the books. Just Stop Oil protesters have vandalised an Aston Martin showroom in central London. Demonstrators sat on Park Lane, some gluing themselves to the road, while another activist sprayed orange paint over the luxury car maker's building. The group is demanding the government halts all new oil and gas licences. Well, meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion is also staging a demonstration of their own, marching in Parliament Square. It comes as the Home Secretary announces plans to crack down on protests that cause serious disruption and threaten public safety. Suella Braverman says police will be given new powers to take a more proactive approach, specifically targeting tactics used by some climate activists. The government is pushing ahead with a law to keep Britain moving during transport strikes. Legislation will be introduced to ensure minimum service levels during walkouts. However, unions say it will be unworkable. The measures are expected to come into force next year. You're watching GB News, the People's Channel. Don't go anywhere. Nana will be back in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's fast approaching 37 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now it is time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? NHS hospitals have reportedly increased their spending on spin doctors and have hired 1,000 communication staff just this year. Now, with a record of 7 million people on the NHS waiting list and 32,000 people having to wait more than 12 hours in English A&E departments, we have to wonder, is the money being correctly distributed? So what do you think? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined now by consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also Dawn Neeson. Hello, welcome. Good to see you guys. Right, now, the NHS, they do spend a lot of money, don't they?
Too much.
Too much. And at the moment, it's not net zero managers now. It's not diversity and inclusion. This time it's communication managers.
Yeah, it's not just that, because I had a look at this. They're spending a record amount on press officers, £40 million a year on diversity officers. They're paid on average. What is a diversity officer, by the way?
I've got no idea. Anyone?
And at the average is £47,000 for a diversity officer. The average nurse earns $33,000 a year. What do we need more of? Nurses who save lives, who do work throughout the night, throughout the day. They work on Christmas Day. Do diversity officers work on Christmas Day? And apparently most NHS trusts have 3 diversity officers. I don't think they need any.
I don't honestly...
Not one.
Do not understand. Well, we've managed to get this show out, right? OK.
Yeah.
We have somebody representing an ethnic minority. We have someone representing the gay community, and we've got a middle-aged old bag. So, and we've managed to do that without a diversity officer.
We've managed it.
Who knew?
Well, that's because we focused on what the people could do rather than where they're from, and I think that's the slight mistake of the diversity side of the argument as well. I think it's important to have people from all walks of life be open to that and visibly make sure that you are representing, because that's important.
Yes.
But do you know that some NHS trusts employ car park environmental officers? Car park environmental officers.
What's
what are
that?
They also employ energy and carbon officers. What for?
Just to check the carbon.
And if you look in the Sunday Times, the Guardian, where a lot of these public sector jobs are advertised, there'll be a clutch of them advertised today, even though the NHS is grinding to a halt. Doctors are about to go on strike, which I don't think should be allowed. Nurses...
Yeah, they shouldn't be allowed. I think
shouldn't be allowed to go on strike,
but I think it should be that they can't do it, but the caveat is that their pay will always increase with inflation.
It should.
Irrespective, and that way people will probably sign up to that.
But 40% of jobs in the NHS are management level.
It's got to stop. That's ridiculous.
It's terrible.
And they are the 5th biggest employer in the world, globally.
Isn't it?
And 1.3 million employees.
And it's
how many of them are actually doing the jobs you want them to be doing?
Every Secretary of State for Health comes in and says, and I'm going to put a stop to the pen pushers, I'm going to put a stop to the bureaucrats, I'm going to bring back matron. And I think if I was given £1 every time I've written that story, I'd be a millionaire.
Oh, yeah, no, true.
Because it
absolutely.
never, ever happens.
I think part of this is, though, the short-term nature of our politics, though, isn't it? Because it's a cycle of 4 to 5 years, so they don't get anything done, and then you've seen how they're just changing. Now it's a health secretary.
We could ask the new Chancellor about this, because, of course, he was Secretary of State for Health for 6 years.
He was really successful, wasn't he?
Yeah, so what did he do about that? How many more press officers were employed during that time? How many more diversity officers were employed during that time on his watch? And he's now de facto Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister is no longer Liz Truss, because he's gone in as Chancellor and he's ripped up all her tax policies. But he ran the NHS for 6 years, and all these problems multiplied on his watch.
But he's a millionaire, though, so he's done OK.
Yeah, and so are several of his mates, I understand, from how things worked out during the COVID thing.
Steady.
Allegedly.
Yes,
I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a good thing, though. Is it good to question it? I mean, we know that Rishi Sunak, his wife, has a share in Infosys, which is a company that has had, I think it's £500 million worth of public money for public sector contracts. I mean, that's written down. I'm not making that up. Yeah. And so it just feels a bit, you know...
But going back to these press officers, when Dawn and I were young reporters and you would do a story about the NHS...
Back in 1872,
yes,
by the way.
I know. Charles Dickens was our news editor. We didn't speak to a press officer. We spoke to a doctor.
Yes.
Or, there weren't all these managers. It's just exploded. Mind you, that was the same with the local council. My first local paper was in Cheltenham. I used to speak to the senior officers. Now that council's probably got 5 press officers. And what's their job? To try and deflect us away from the real truth.
It's actually misinformation. That's what they're there to do.
Yeah. How do we stop? I mean, how can we even go about stopping it? I mean, I was speaking to Sarah. She's a nurse. She's saying... She wouldn't even know where to start to complain, to talk to somebody to do this.
I think you put a freeze on all non-medical jobs in the NHS overnight. Think how much money that'd save. They've got to save money. We've got to save money because to balance the books. Put a freeze on. We don't need any more pen pushers. We don't need any more administrators, computer operators. We certainly don't need any more car park environmental officers.
And maybe don't replace them when they leave.
Yes, exactly.
There was one NHS manager on £450,000 a year.
Shocking.
Many of them are on £200,000.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. It's mad.
It's just
I mean, how can you justify
it's like winning
that?
the lottery. How many nurses could you employ for that?
No, it's so obvious. I mean, it's obvious to you and I, it's obvious to everybody and those within the profession, but somehow something's infiltrated the system where they keep putting this layer and layer and layer of management, and yet they're forgetting... It's turning into a mushroom cloud, but it's going the wrong way. Where it needs to be heavy is at the bottom, but it's become very top-heavy.
I've got a Whitehall book with all the different departments and all the press office numbers, and it's page after page after page for the Department of Health, page after page, and they've normally, when you ring, through to voicemail.
Well, also, it's very detached.
Send an email.
As well.
They don't want to speak to you.
Send an email.
You'll never get anybody.
They literally do work 9 till 5. I mean, you know, the news agenda is sort of like 24/7. The medical staff work 24/7, certainly the nurses. And yet, you know, you try and get an answer from them at sort of like, you know, 5 o'clock on a Friday. No chance.
And it's very fragmented as well. The different trusts, this one, that one, that one is that. And I think once they did that, then it became sort of very decentralised. And then things like economies of scale, so buying in bulk across an entire platform where you can get really cheap procurement of medicines and things like that, they lost that.
They did.
And it just, I just don't I don't see how they can fix it. It's going to take a lot of work.
Every time you hear we're going to reorganise and get Whitehall, that just means create a load more bureaucracy and spend a load more public money, our money, taxpayers' money, your viewers' money. That's what they do. And it never makes it any more efficient.
No.
It's always worse.
But you know what, Nana? It's almost become a cult now. We've used that word quite a bit on this programme today, haven't we? It is a cult, and people are, apart from GB News, people are scared to criticise the NHS. You can't say anything bad about it. All the angels, we clapped on our doorsteps for them. But no, there is something very, very wrong with that system, and it needs to be sorted. But all the time we are denying that, it's never going to happen. And you have, as you say, 7 million people now waiting for operations and surgery and to see a doctor.
When Boris nearly died, which he nearly did, and the NHS were brilliant with him, as they always are when they do their best, I thought, that's it. Any hope now of reform of the NHS is gone. What he's going to do is just pump more money into it, but it will just keep taking money. It's like a sponge. You can spend record amounts of money, but it's got to change the way it's operating. People can't keep missing
But you know, Andrew,
doctor's
people go,
appointments.
oh, privatise it. You're talking about privatising it. How dare you?
Just trying to make it efficient.
I don't even mind if it's not privatised. I believe there should be something there, but I think there might have to be an element where people start putting money in. But I also believe that there needs to be an element where they stop wasting money.
Yeah.
Before they ask us for more taxpayers' cash, they need to explain to us where the money's going and what percentage is waste, because I hear that we have the biggest contribution that we put towards our health services compared to everybody.
Yeah.
But it's the percentage that we waste which is higher than all the others.
Yeah.
And that is the problem.
Yeah.
I know. It's very depressing. I was so depressed when I read that.
But very, very, very quick personal story about the waste in the NHS.
Yeah,
A member of the family needed some urgent medical supplies sent through, so we ordered it on the NHS website. It came through. But then they sent another package, and this is expensive medical stuff here. And we said, well, we don't need this. Can you just take it back? He's like, oh, no, just get rid of it.
Terrible.
I mean...
Yeah.
I've heard that story
What
before. Walking sticks.
Yes,
apparently.
yes.
Walking sticks go walking. They do, and
they don't bother.
And they don't bother.
They don't bother. I've got a set of crutches. I know I should have given them back, but I have them. And every now and again when I hurt my knee, I do use them again, so they are reusable.
But they never ask for them back.
Never ask them back.
No,
but I used them. I didn't just... But I paid for them anyway.
Yeah, through your taxes.
Through my taxes, through my nose, literally. Yeah. But anyway, today I've been asking, is the NHS wasting money on backroom staff? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Patricia says, why do they need diversity staff? We've been a diverse nation for years and years. We don't need people to teach us how to integrate. Right. Vera says, yes, start with diversity managers, obviously, but there are plenty more who can be removed from the public payroll without any detriment to services. And Henry says, absolutely. Have you ever seen a workforce come to that, even a customer profile, that is more diverse than the hospital or a GP practice? Yeah, you make a very good point. It is a very diverse environment. Well, as ever, we've got loads of thoughts. Where's our GB viewers? They usually come and talk to us about what's going on. The show's nothing without them and their views. Ah, there you go. This show's nothing without you and your views. Let's find our GB News voice. Hello. Hello. So who have we got then? We've got, let's start with you. First GB viewer. Is that Julie? Julie
Hi,
Ford.
Nana. Yes, it is. Thanks for having me on again today. I agree with everything that your panel has said, to be honest with you. I genuinely don't see the need for these middle managers and these backroom pen pushers. You know, we are able to have common sense. We are able to work most of this out for ourselves. And for me, the most concerning thing is they keep putting these different levels of management in, but it's not actually solving the problem. So these managers aren't very good at managing. And I think that's really the key point here. If they were actually resolving the problems, the waiting lists, the amount of ambulances that we don't have, then I'd say, yeah, there's a need for them, but they're not solving that problem.
They're not solving the problem at all. In fact, they've told us not to go to A&E at all, which is interesting, really. Right, let's have a chat with Miranda Richardson, not the Miranda Richardson, a different one. She's calling there from Northamptonshire. Hello, Miranda.
Hi, Nana, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Do you know, I've just been listening the whole afternoon. My daughter is currently 36 weeks pregnant, OK? And she's got to go in for some blood tests, as well as seeing her midwife for some other blood tests. So she said, well, can't I just have one set of blood? You're going to take the same blood, ironically. No, you have to come in and go to two completely different departments and have two lots of blood taken. It's like, this is just bonkers. And that's a really small example on a really small scale. But when you magnify that across an entire business, there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of millions of pounds. But it's OK, because there'll be somebody in an office somewhere that will communicate out to a team that's probably a really good idea that they send her for two sets of blood tests. Well, and they're probably paid 3 times the amount of the nurse that's going to be taking the bloods.
Listen, Miranda, they do it all the time. They do it all the time with letters. You get 2 letters, 3 letters of the same thing. And if you don't go to the one thing that was the wrong one, then you've missed the appointment. They give you a bad mark. Let's go next to John Reid in Kidderminster. John, your view.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nana. This is such a good question. It's unbelievable. Listen, I was born in April 1948, and in July of that year, the NHS was also born. So almost my entire life I've grown up. Age 16, I had an accident and an ambulance was called. I was taken to the local hospital, Ashford in Middlesex, and I was treated in the A&E. I stayed in a week and I came home. Would that happen today? No, of course it wouldn't. And why wouldn't it? Because there's bloody queues a mile long of ambulances. Words fail me. There is so much dead wood in the NHS. What they need to specialise in is treatment of people who need treatment.
Well, that would be a good place for them to start.
Charts as to which is the best hospital.
Yeah,
Rubbish.
well, listen, it's rubbish. It is, John. Thank you very much for that. Although you did swear, so we'll take out the swear. Apologies if anyone was offended by that, but we understand why you said it. John, thank you so much. Thank you so much, my great British voices. Julie in Bedfordshire, Miranda in Northamptonshire, and John Reid in Kidderminster. Thank you so much. Right, well, we'll move on to something else. Now, listen, do you remember this guy, comedian Eddie Izzard, a left-wing activist who identifies as a woman? He's formally launched her campaign to stand as a Labour Party MP at the next general election. However, the announcement has not come without controversy, as reports have suggested that the selection process could involve one of Labour's all-women shortlists. Now, after the news was announced, Labour MP Rosie Duffield expressed her concerns during a fringe meeting at the Labour Party conference. She said, "I will not be a hypocrite and I won't lie and I won't say that a man is a woman. Eddie Izzard is not a woman." She also warned that we won't be the only female Labour MP who leaves the party if Eddie is on the all-women shortlist. Then that sparks the question, is Labour listening to women? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by consultant editor of the Daily Mail, and I was about to call you Nigel Nelson. He does the Mirror.
He's the other side.
Andrew Pearce and also Dawn Neeson.
You can call me whatever you want, Nana, I don't mind. That's fine.
I've got a very short-term memory. It always goes so quickly. So Dawn, I'll start with you then. Let's do that. What do you think? He's a woman.
How very dare you accuse me of being a woman? Yes, I am a woman, and this debate constantly annoys me. And the Eddie Izzard thing going up in Sheffield Central, one of the candidates he is up against is a very young female, our councillor up there, who has lived in the area all her life and fought for the people of Sheffield. Now, Eddie Izzard studied there. He's played a few gigs there. And get this, Nana, the other excuse is he once ran through it whilst running a marathon. Serious. That gives him the right to stand and represent the people of Sheffield Central. Now, it's insane that look, all women shortlists are illegal. So in theory, it's not an all-women shortlist, but it is because there's only two people on it, and they are both. It's not a woman. He's a man.
He's a man.
He's a bloke.
He's a bloke.
He wears women's clothes. That's fine if he wants to do that.
Yeah, fine.
When I was younger, we called that transvestism, but now it's got all these other weird and wonderful names. But if the Labour Party choose him on an all-women shortlist, I think it will lead to a mass insurrection amongst women.
Well, exactly.
Because women are already deeply unhappy with Keir Starmer, who doesn't appear to know whether only a woman can have a cervix. Asked that question, he said, it's not a straightforward question. Yes, it is.
It's biology.
It's biology.
Yeah. Did he not study biology at school? Has he not seen his wife with her clothes off?
Exactly. Listen, basically, Ezzy Izzard, I'll call you her or whatever you want to be called in your female name, but you are a man, and so you cannot go on an all-women shortlist if that even happens. So it's now time for Supplement Sunday. Now, this is the part of the show where me and my panel look at some of the other stories making the papers today. I'm joined by consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Right, Andrew, you've got your supplement. It's about 1,000 Paddington Bears.
It's in the Mail on Sunday. It's a lovely, lovely story. I was one of the many hundreds of thousands who went to Green Park to see the flowers that were put down for our wonderful Queen, Elizabeth the Great, as Boris called her. Many people, thousands of people, left little Paddington Bears after that wonderful stunt she did for her Jubilee when she talked to Paddington, produced the marmalade sandwich from her voluminous handbag. And all these, I wondered what's going to happen to all these Paddingtons. Well, they've all been professionally cleaned, and they're going to Barnardo's charity, of which the Queen used to be patron. And of course, Barnardo's is about a lot of orphan children And, of course, Paddington was an orphan.
Oh,
so I think that is just
little
the
marmalade
sweetest thing.
sandwich.
And every single child will be told the history of those Paddingtons.
Now, Dawn, you've got a story for me. Dawn, what have you got?
Yeah, well, mine's about Halloween, because, I mean, it's scary enough, is it? So let's have fun with something scary, shall we? 2 stories about Halloween in the papers today. One, we are expecting a freakish 500-mile African plume, which is going to make Halloween 23 degrees, and that's going to make it one of the hottest years ever. But please don't worry. This is just a nice, hot Halloween, OK? You're not going to die in hellfire with global warming. And the other one is, what is the sexiest Halloween costume? What do you reckon, Nana?
It's a witch on a broomstick.
No, it's not. It's a mummy.
Oh. Is it because you can unravel it? Oh, right. I see where you're going with that one.
We want warm weather because people are going to struggle with their gas bills.
Exactly, so we should be thankful for a bit of global warming. Well, speaking of global warming, finally, I've got one for you. It's all about Just Stop Oil. Now, Aileen Getty, the granddaughter of the Getty Oil founder, is reportedly a founding donor of an American-based organisation that funds several high-profile climate protest groups around the world, including Just Stop Oil. What do you make of that? Yes?
Of course she is. More money than sense. That's the point.
Isn't
She's
it?
never done a day's work in her life.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
And plus, we're all hard up, food's going through the roof, and they're wasting a perfectly good tin of soup.
Yeah.
So true. It's unbelievable, isn't
Can
it?
they
Really
just drag them off the street immediately and stop this? They're disrupting people trying to go to work, do their job. An ambulance had to be turned around the other day.
Sad.
A fire engine had to be turned around.
That husband whose wife was in the car, she was ill, they wouldn't move. It's awful. Well, it's something that needs to happen to those people, and it's not going to be pretty. They need to stop all that. But on today's show, we've been asking, is democracy dead in the UK? And according to our Twitter poll, 83% of you say yes. You're with me, I'm with you on that. And 17% of you say no. I'm going to say a big thank you to my panel. Consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Thank you so much, Dawn. Lovely to see you. And as ever, a big thank you to you at home for your company. It's always as fun as ever. I'll be back next Friday at 4 to discuss all the top stories. But now I'll leave you with the weather forecast. Have a fabulous week, and I'll see you on Friday.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather wet across the south and west, but drier in the north. Let's take a look at the details. After a dry afternoon, it'll be a wet end to the day as heavy rain moves in from the south with brisk winds. Coastal areas could see gusts of up to 30 miles per hour at times. Skies will cloud over in the south to end the afternoon, followed by some heavy rain this evening. It'll be breezy as the rain arrives, particularly around the coast. It'll also turn wet and windy across Wales this evening as a band of heavy rain moves